2, 3. Should be ready now. Setting it up. I'm just going to do an intro. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Dress the Daughters. My name's Joy, and today we have a special treat. We're going to be talking with a courageous lady who's going to share her story of courage with us. So we're really privileged to have this session with this special lady. I'm going to introduce her in a moment, but as is our custom, we're just going to say a quick prayer. So thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to do this live and for the opportunity to learn and share about things we've gone through and how we've developed courage through it all. Amen. Okay, so welcome everyone. As I said, today we're going to be sharing about a story of courage, a courageous story. And today we have with us Ayo. Welcome, Ayo.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here too.
Would you like to just tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, tell us your age, where you're from, just give us a little something.
Hey, my name is Ayomide Badu. I'm 23 and I'm Nigerian. I'm also the host's niece. So yeah.
We had to throw in that fun fact there. Yeah, you are my wonderful, sweet, gorgeous niece, and not so little. You are a big lady, and yeah. So we just want to find out a bit more about your story, a bit more about your background. So in Nigeria, where did you grow up? Where did your sort of life begin? I guess.
I grew up in northern Nigeria in Bauchi, and then after a couple of years, my family moved to Jos because I think it was just more convenient to live in Jos at that time. We lived there for a good number of years, and then we moved to Yola, which is further up in the north, where I started my secondary school, and then I had to come back to Jos again because of um the terrorist attacks that were happening in northern Nigeria uh during the Boko Haram time when it was very rampant everywhere. So I had to move back to Jos and finish my high school, secondary school. Then I graduated and I first got into a medical university in Nigeria, Bingham University, where I spent a year. But then I decided to just uh go somewhere else. I decided to go to Ukraine to start over because my sister was already in that university in Ukraine. So I just thought it was a good idea and I went there pretty much.
Yeah. Wow. So that's so interesting. So you've had quite a lot of movement in your early years. And what was it like living in northern Nigeria? Because we hear a lot about northern Nigeria and we hear about some of the challenges there. How would you describe your experience growing up there?
Well, during my childhood, it was very peaceful,
Mm.
especially in Bauchi. There was no occurrence anyway that I heard of. Well, I was small, but anyway, it was quite peaceful. In Jos, however, the problems were a lot, um, especially in like maybe 2011 or so, around early 2010s. There were a lot of riots, there were bombs, and so many things in Jos. So a lot of people actually left Jos at that time, which is why we went away anyway, why we went to Yola, which was more peaceful. But I found that the places that were more concentrated with Muslims had less problems because they wouldn't go and start a problem where they are living, I think. That's the logic I have about it. But anyway, it was more peaceful when we moved to Yola. Then later on, when we moved to Jos, it was better. There were riots, but there were only riots in like the outskirts of Jos. So people living in the city didn't really, experience anything like that. So yes.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, and I like your logic there. That obviously, the peacefulness was caused by the makeup of the people, the population there, and the types of people that lived in the area where you were. So it was kind of like driven by the sort of religious and political views of those who lived there, and that's what sort of impacted the peacefulness. But it's great to hear that you had sort of more of a peaceful time in your early years. So you mentioned that you moved to Ukraine. What was that like? That whole transition from Nigeria in Africa to Europe, effectively moving to you know um, Ukraine. Which city were you in? What was the move like? How did you feel?
Okay, so at first I was excited because I was going to study abroad and everything. Everything was going to be different. I had more independence. But I was going to stay with my sister anyway for my first year because she was graduating. She was in her final year when I was in first year. So I think it was convenient for me. It was a smooth landing because she was there already, set everything up and all that. So I was happy, I guess, in my first year. Then after she left, I had to be alone and then finally actually start um figuring out my own space and all of that. And it really helped that we had a nice church at that time. Um yeah, it was a really nice church. It was the lead pastor for that branch was a student because the person who founded the church anyway studied in Ukraine as well, in Nigerian man. But it was very nice because everyone who came together really took it seriously and we put our backs into it, put our money, our time and everything. So that was like our whole life. So every day was some church related event. So all our friends were church people or maybe school people, or mostly church people. So I think it was really nice in the earlier years, like my first to third year. And then in my fourth year, or yeah, my early fourth year is when COVID happened. And it's also when that church I was in had some issues. So the church had to be closed down. That was a
Mm,
really big, like a really big blow to so many of us that were there because
mm,
it was like our entire life, which it was everything basically. But anyway, when it fell
mm,
apart, COVID also happened at the same time, so it was worse. We were just disconnected from the rest of the world, and we even stopped going to school.
mm,
And we spent quite a lot of time during lockdown indoors. So by the
mm,
time we were now coming out, it was struggling to find another church. It was a lot of things. And then in general, apart from associating with the other students who were in the church, the Ukrainians there, I can't really say we had that many Ukrainian friends because they were not very friendly. uh, they quite a few of them are friendly, very few. Maybe if you have a job at the company, they will be friendly with you. But you're not just going to walk up to a random Ukrainian on the street and make friends with them. So
mm.
the Eastern European thing is real. They are not very happy people, I think. Anyway. But I also experienced a bit of racism there. So during the war, when I'm just going to go into the war briefly, like during the war, when a lot of people were saying what happened to them, and everyone was so surprised, I was not shocked at all because just while I was there unprovoked, I have almost gotten spat on by a Ukrainian for no reason.
Wow.
I was just
Wow.
coming out of an elevator. The person was going in and tried to spit on me. I was just walking past them on the street, tried to spit on like for no reason. That's just one instance. So many horrible things have happened to foreign students in that country, and the Ukrainians do not ever face any um repercussions. Like
Mm.
someone was literally killed one time and the culprit was caught on video and everything. Was a viral Instagram situation. And she got out the next day and there was
What?
no explanation. Yeah, so that's just another instance. So I don't know what kind of culture they have for that, why they treat foreigners this way. Maybe it's not even just black people, actually, just anyone who's not Ukrainian or who's not maybe their race or something. But yes, so they're not very friendly to
Mm,
outsiders in general.
wow.
It
Yeah.
was a
So
bit difficult.
So it sounds like you were really excited. You landed in Ukraine, you had the support of your sister and your church, and then it was sort of the rug was ripped up from under you, and you were kind of stuck with, no church and support from, in terms of your faith and your well-being and your in terms of the community that you'd built up with the church. And then you had more challenges with COVID. So obviously that those challenges were being experienced around the world, but you being so I guess a foreigner in a nation that, as you said, was a bit of a hostile environment, feeling it all the more. And were you able to have any fun, during those COVID years indoors or during those early years in Ukraine? Did you get to have any fun? Because you were kind of, how old were you? About 19 at this point in time? And
Um, well, in during okay, so I got there when I was 16. So during COVID, yes, I was about 19 or 20. So the most fun I would have is go out with my housemates, pretty much because since we couldn't go out with that many people, we happened to bond more. So they became my friends or my closest friends. So we would maybe do birthday parties for ourselves, or we would go out very often to places that allow um people to come to their restaurants or whatever they have going on. So things like that. Yes. And when my church was
mm,
active, we had many events. We had like a choir concert, or we had during the summer we would have like a braai, like an outdoor thing, many games, and then tons of food and stuff like that. So that was fun for me.
wow. So it sounds like you did get to have some fun in the early years when things were kind of what you call quote unquote normal, when things were a little bit more normalized. You can't, even though it was a bit of a shock to the system, a bit of a difference in culture, you were still sort of settling in. And what about the language barriers? Because obviously in Nigeria, mostly English speaking, and then northern Nigeria, you speak, is it Hausa mostly, isn't it? A Nigerian language.
Yeah, in northern Nigeria, they speak Hausa everywhere, but everyone speaks English anyway. But anyway, in Ukraine, we were taught Ukrainian in as a compulsory course for medicine in the first to second year. But we didn't actually need it that much, except if you were interacting with Ukrainian people, which we were not. Anyway, so we were taught in English and we mostly hung out with ourselves. So we didn't really need it. Only people who willingly wanted to learn Ukrainian actually learned Ukrainian. Or people who had to work in companies where they spoke Ukrainian. Those people knew Ukrainian. Yeah.
Interesting. Because I know from speaking to her that obviously your sister learned some Ukrainian and her now husband learned Ukrainian, and picked up bits along the way. And I think I visited even at Lviv whilst you guys were there, or when your sister was there at least. And it's quite different from English as a language. So
Yeah.
it's not something you can sort of pick up naturally or easily unless you sort of make that intention, deliberate effort to learn it. So of course that's a barrier as well, isn't it, in terms of relating with the locals there in your community. So tell me just a little bit more about before the war broke out. We're going to focus on that in a little bit, but you mentioned some hostile experiences where someone tried to spit on you. Were there any other sort of interactions with Ukrainians that stand out in your mind, or anything else about your experience before the war that's sort of memorable?
Negative or positive? Which,
Or either,
oh,
either.
okay, so for positive experiences, um, in my second year and third year, I used to be interested in modeling. So some very few friendly Ukrainians would see you on the road and, oh, you look so nice. Can we do like a modeling thing? And then they would go and do pictures and everything. One of them even paid me, so that was nice. That was one of the few experiences. And then from the makeup studio where the person did my face, the photo shoot makeup, one Ukrainian girl on Instagram just commented, and then after that she followed me and became really friendly. Then I was trying to make friends or be more open, I guess. So she invited me over to her house with her family, and everyone was really friendly. Her mom cooked for me, And then I brought my other friends, I guess, because she asked if I wanted to bring any more people. So that's one of the very few positive experiences I had with Ukrainians. They were very nice and they spoke English, and she was really making an effort and all that. So there was that. And then apart from that, um one of the other negative things is that one time I was coming back from a church thing, because my church had two branches. There was another one in the city 2 hours away. So we'd go and come from there, and we would work with their choir when we were doing like a general choir concert. So we came back and we were at the train station, and a random drunk Ukrainian man came to start basically trying to attack us with his knife. And no one did
What?
anything. Yes, actually, no one did anything. Everyone was just looking at us. So we had to stand there and like just not antagonize him, and then move very, really slowly. And he still kept cursing at us in Ukrainian and shouting, and no one did anything while he basically almost tried to attack us. So that's another thing. That's one. Then also, there was a boy that arrived in Lviv. Um, he came from Nigeria newly, and he looked very well dressed in his picture, because everyone knows when you're going in the winter, you have to do and overdo because it's really cold there. It looked like he had like 3 jackets on in his picture. But immediately he arrived, he died. He died in his hostel.
What?
And there was no explanation whatsoever. Yes, they said that it's because he froze to death, which didn't make
What?
sense at all. Because in the hostels, even if your room doesn't have heating, the next 2 rooms has heating. There's a blanket and everything, so you actually wouldn't die from the cold in general.
Is this
And
in the
then
university?
this was in the other university in Lviv. I think it was the technological one. And they photographed him dead, but he was fully clothed in his jacket and everything. So how did he just die randomly on
What
the
time of
floor?
year was this?
This was maybe around January, but it was maybe the year before COVID. But anyway, the man that was in charge of the hostel, we called them commandants. His explanation was that the boy had called him and told him that he was cold, and he told him something about waiting till tomorrow. So he just went away, and he came and found him dead in the morning, which we didn't believe because that's not possible. So he probably did something to him, and they didn't want to do an autopsy, and they didn't want to answer his parents and his family in Nigeria until finally they let them come over, and they took the boy's body and took him back. So that was a horrible situation, and there's never any, like, even if you report to the police, all these kind of situations, they will never do anything. So when I heard that situation, I was just thanking God for my life, because in the hostel that I was staying before I moved to an apartment, the commandant there was very aggressive. And everyone knew he was very aggressive. He used to shout, he used to bang things, he acts like he wants to hit you and stuff like that. So I had started working part-time, and I would close really late. Or even if I wasn't working, I would go for choir practice, and we would go late into the night. And the hostel had a curfew of 11, which was different from other hostels, which didn't have a curfew. So I used to tell the woman who is above him in the hostel that I'm coming back at this time, and she's fine with it. Then whenever this man is on the shift, he would make so much trouble about everything. So I came back, and my friend was also coming back at the same time as me. And we knocked on the door. The woman was going to let us in, but this man came there and said that she shouldn't open the door. Then he opened the door and came to like try to intimidate us. And he pushed me. Then he tried to strangle my friend.
What?
And then I started shouting. So he moved back and left. And then he left us out in the cold for like 30 minutes. Then he now came and opened the door. So the next day, we went to the school and complained about the situation. And they did nothing, because he was just suspended for a week, and he just came back like nothing happened. He was still working in the same place. We were just supposed to be fine with it. So anything that happened to us there again, and they wouldn't have done anything about it. So
So you came back a little bit late past the curfew time, and he he prevented you from coming in for a short while and then eventually let you in, but was really aggressive. And that's why you raised the complaint, but nothing was done. And how did that make you feel? Did that sort of make you feel like, well, whatever happens to me, how did it make you feel?
It made me feel unsafe because he tried to strangle my friend, and we included that in our complaint. We didn't just say he didn't open the door for us, and they still did nothing about it. So I'm pretty sure that boy didn't just die of the cold situation, because when other people died in the school or in that country anyway, and it was a black person, they would never follow up. They would never actually imprison the person that did this. There was clear evidence that this person did this. The person will go free the next day, or they've done it before. So there was never any justice in court for foreigners. So we just knew, like, if we had any problem with our landlord, we had any problem with any Ukrainians, just don't bother reporting it because it's not going to go anywhere. Basically, just how it was.
Wow, that's really, 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 really scary. So you're living already before COVID, before the war, in a quite difficult circumstances. You're quite young, you're in your teenage years still, and you're having to sort of fend for yourself. Your parents, your family have invested all this money and time and effort to get you over to have a education and make a career for yourself. And you've got all this like hostile treatment, even just to have basic lodgings and work and security. That sounds like quite difficult circumstances. And what kind of kept you going? What was sort of the thing that kept you positive and keep going, really?
Well, just praying and also communicating with my family regularly really helped. So yeah, I didn't really feel too bad in that place because it could get really depressing and lonely at times in that place. But then it really helped to pray a lot and closer to God and work on my relationship with God and communicate with my family a lot. So yes.
Yeah, it's so important, having your faith and your family to see you through. And what about your education? So obviously the whole reason you went to Ukraine in the first instance was to get an education, and you were studying medicine. So how was your education in all of this?
It was good. It was okay. It was fine, I guess. But I realized another thing that they didn't really I don't think they care much for foreigners because I noticed a difference in our um curriculum and teaching styles. So they would separate the Ukrainian students from the foreign students. And for maybe earlier courses that we had where we had to learn how to maybe sorry, not so do a stitch or something. I remember this clearly. We were told to bring something like a sponge or something like that to basically stimulate. But then when I now walked out and I walked past one of the classes, they were doing the exact same class and they had a cadaver, they had some other more relevant item to work with than us. And this has happened multiple times. So there was a very big difference in everything that they did for us. And then I noticed that they were very, very quick to expel students too, foreign students. So they would expel a student for arguing with their teacher. They would expel a student for missing more than three classes. They would expel a student for missing the deadline to pay tuition, many, many things. So there was one particular student who went to speak to a teacher. He actually didn't go and argue with her. He just went to speak to the teacher about um his grades, that he didn't like the score he got in that particular class, and then she started shouting. Then the next day he was expelled, and that was it, and there was nothing he could do about it. They won't take the student back. He just has to figure out his life, or he has to go back to Nigeria and find a new school and stuff like that. So it was difficult, but in general the curriculum was still okay because many of the people who graduated from there are now working in their countries successfully, and they're able to pass foreign exams as well. So they still taught basic level of medicine. Yes.
Wow. And do you think that I know you've said it was a different experience for the Ukrainian students, but do you think that there was that unfair treatment for reprimands as well. So if, for example, the guy who went to speak to his teacher about his grades, was there any sort of comparator with Ukrainian students? Do you see, apart from sort of the tools and techniques and teaching style, were there any sort of clear examples of different treatment for Ukrainians?
Well, I can't say I didn't hear of any because I didn't know any Ukrainian medical students in the school personally. So I can't say, but I highly doubt that would be the case because apparently they have a system where they can opt for not paying for the education, and in exchange they would work for the government for 5 years for free or something like that. So I think they probably wouldn't just dismiss them, or maybe they will have lighter punishments, or they wouldn't even put themselves in that situation because they're going to school for free. And I don't know, but I've never heard of any. Anyway.
Interesting. Still sounds horrific. Going to school, you just want to get an education, and you're constantly in fear of being dismissed and really having to start all over or be sent back. That's really, really challenging. I mean, obviously, there's some circumstances where it would be reasonable, but it does sound like you've had overall difficult circumstances in terms of living, education, and community. And so tell us about the war. So the war started, and where were you when the war started? Do you remember that moment?
Yes, I was in Lviv, where my school was. And it was, well, the days leading up to the war, a lot of people weren't taking it seriously. So we just thought it was just another day of Putin making threats. So our teachers were even telling us to go to school and everything. So the week before, I remember some of my classmates were very concerned. So they went to the dean's office and they demanded for them to let us not go to school for a couple, maybe 2 weeks, and see how things go. And they said no. So the day that everything happened, and we woke up and we heard there were bombs in Kiev and Kharkov, our teacher were actually still telling us to come to school. So anyway, we had to figure things out for ourselves. Me and my housemates left our house and went to the border, which is bordering Poland. So Lviv is bordering Poland. So that was evening anyway when we went to the border. We couldn't actually drive in a taxi to the border because there were too many cars trying to leave at the same time. So we got off kilometers away. And then we basically had to walk 5 hours in the night to the border, which was terrible. Yes. We didn't know what to carry with us. So we took as much as we could in like small bags, and they were heavy and everything. We didn't know what to expect, basically. So we're very unprepared.
So we're gonna just break it down. We're gonna rewind for a short while. So the war broke out in February, as the news would have it. The war broke out in February 2022, so over 2 years ago. And you said that people weren't taking it seriously. I actually remember a conversation with you around that time where I think, was it your 18th birthday or it was 21st birthday? It was a special birthday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which was it?
It was 21, my 21st.
Yeah, so that's a special birthday, and most people want to celebrate. So I remember that you traveled back to the country, didn't you, just before the war broke out, because people really weren't taking it seriously. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so my sister's wedding was the first Saturday of February, and then I now flew back in on the 12th. I flew back to Ukraine, even if there were rumors of the war happening. So I went back like a normal, day, and I was about to return to school.
You went back to school. Yeah.
Yes. And then the war now broke out 12 days after. And my birthday was on the 19th. So I had just finished my birthday and everything. No one cared about this whole situation until when the actual bombs went off. Then everyone started panicking and buying toilet paper and buying, all the ATMs were empty, the shops were empty, everything got real the same day. And then in the evening, a lot of people just decided to leave because there was no point packing all those things and staying and waiting for your own city to be bombed next because we didn't know what was going to happen. So we decided to leave. That was when we decided to go to the border. Yes.
And how? So obviously there was panic, like you just said. People started to take it seriously. Things became real. What was going through your mind? I just really can't imagine being in that situation where you've just celebrated, your sister's wedding, beautiful family occasion, you've just celebrated your birthday, you've just gone back to school. Suddenly, all the rumors have become reality. They're no longer rumors, they're real. And you're sort of like, we need to get out of here.
Yes. So at that moment, I was hesitant about leaving because I didn't know what was going to happen, and the teachers were threatening us that if we don't come to school, they would put absent on our record because every day we have tests. Every day, if you don't show up, is absent, and if you have 3 absence, you pay, or if it adds up to too many, they expel you. As I said earlier. So
Wow.
they threatened us with the absence if we don't show up in the middle of the bombs actually going off in other cities.
Wow.
So we were also trying to figure out whether we should go or not go. And then my uncle, Uncle Tunde, called and was asking what I'm doing. Like, are you thinking you're literally right there at the border? You're not even leaving. Like, you should probably be on your way right now. So that's when I started thinking of going, okay, maybe we should go. Then my friends, their siblings, so they spoke to their parents who are also panicking in Nigeria and just told them to leave right now. That's when we decided to go. But we didn't know what we were getting. We didn't know
Where to
the
go?
extent it was going to get to. Yes, and we didn't know where to go. Would have made better choices. But we just took a taxi to the border, the nearest one we could get to. And it was a terrible experience there as well. So, yeah.
Wow. So thankfully, your mom's brother had was able to give you some direction in quite a difficult circumstance where you were being threatened with school expulsion and other consequences to not attending school when bombs are going off. Thank goodness you had someone to give you direction in such difficult circumstances, and you decided to make the journey. So tell us about the journey. You said you had to pack bags, they were heavy. Tell us about the journey itself to the border.
Yeah, so we didn't know what to take. We thought we were just going for a few days and maybe they would have settled the situation and we'll come back to our house. So we took these like traveling bags. They're like really big backpacks that are like carry on no hand luggage suitcases, but then as a backpack. So it was really big and we could fit so much inside. And we just took mostly sweaters, then we took some food. So it was actually quite heavy. We didn't know we were going to be carrying it for hours and hours. So we just took as much as we could. And when we got to where they told us we couldn't drive any further, we had to get off and start walking. And we didn't know how far it was either. We just followed all the people that were walking ahead of us and just kept walking. And we were walking for 5 hours. And it was winter, cold, and dark. And we actually didn't know what was going to be. We thought somebody would jump out of the bush because there was a forest there and attack us. So we didn't even know if the Russians were there already. We didn't know anything anyway. So after
Wow.
finally getting to the border, we thought that we have arrived and we are safe now
How did
and
you know?
happy.
How did you know? Sorry to interrupt. How did you know which direction to go in? Were you just simply following the crowd?
Yes, we're just following the crowd because it was a long road and everyone was walking. So we just walked with everyone who was walking. And then when we got to the gate or the fence or anyway, the gate, we thought they were going to process us and everything. They told us to stand at the side, and we
What,
stood.
what do you mean by process us?
Like maybe ask us questions and then just let us go into some room or something at least before they tell us what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
We got there and one of the soldiers there just told us to stand at the side. So we stood there and we waited and waited. We thought he was going to go and ask somebody something and come back, but so many of us kept coming because me and my friends were one of the first African students to get there. at that night anyway, because we didn't see anyone else there. So when we waited there, more people kept coming, we're up to at least maybe 40 by the end of the night. So they kept us standing outside for 8 hours. The entire night we were standing outside in the cold because they
Wow.
just didn't want to
So what
process us.
time is this? What time did you arrive at the border, do you think? Around what time did you get there? It was you walking for 5 hours. What time do you think you got there?
By the time they finally spoke to us in the morning, I think it was around 7:30 or 8. So that means we were walking from like 7 p.m. to 12. That's the meaning. Because we got there at midnight. We spent the whole night standing there. And when we left our house, it was around 6 that we left our house. So yes, it was horrible. There
So
was
you
no
must have.
sitting place.
Hmm. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
There was no sitting place or anything, so we had to stand there or sit on our luggage. And the luggage we brought was some backpack, so we couldn't really sit on that anyway. So we had to stand the whole night or squat or something. And then throughout the time that we were standing there, many, many white people just kept marching past us. Just literally walking straight through the gates, no questions. They just walk in. Why I knew that they were not asking them any questions is the rate at which they were going in. They were just filing in like 10s, 15s. They were just going. 15 of them will match in, and then within like 2 minutes, 15 more will match in. So it means we're not asking them that many questions. Just stamp them and they move. So not all of them were even Ukrainians, because when we were listening to some of the conversations while they were lining up, some of them were German, some of them were American, or in general. But every single non-white person, including Arabs, Indians, everyone was made to stand somewhere. Sure, we know that we didn't have the necessary immigration information, but they could have put us in a room. They didn't have to make us stand in the cold. And we knew there was a room because in the morning they put us in that room. So what was the point of making us stand there anyway? And they could have put us
Wow.
in that room. So yeah, anyway. But yeah, so the other people were just filing in, filing in. So when we were finally processed in the morning, we were made to go to a room and wait there maybe another hour. And then they decided to take us into the country and put us in a house. They put us in different houses anyway, and told us where to go the next day. So when we went to the place, I don't know, it's one office anyway in the city, and in Warsaw, in Poland. And they told us there that we only had 15 days to spend in Poland. So they were not going to offer us any refugee situation. We're just able to stay there long enough to go to wherever we want to go, like to our own country or whatever. So later on, we found out we could have made better choices and gone to Hungary or Romania or somewhere else, because they were more welcoming there, apparently. They brought them to nice houses and fed them. And they even allowed them to stay for like 3 months. They gave some of them jobs and they stayed longer and were able to figure out their lives. But Poland was not very welcoming in general.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So you really had an ordeal, a really negative, challenging experience, horrific, really. Again, you're relatively young at this time. You're without your parents, your family. You're just sort of with friends in a hostile environment. You think you mentioned around 40 people, standing at the gate all night, exhausted. You must have been frightened, worried, scared. It's kind of, you know, worst case scenario. Everything
Yes.
happened all at once. And then what happened in the morning? Tell us.
Well, in the morning, they took us into that place. Like after we stood outside, they made us walk through the gates, and then they checked our bags and looked at our passports and asked us where we are from, just regular questions. Confirm your name, stuff like that. And they took us to the room and waited 1 hour, and they stamped us out of Ukraine. Then they had to discuss with somebody, I guess, before they took us into Poland. So then we went to a what happened? Sorry, so we went to an office first, and they told us where to go in Warsaw. So this office was a city at the border, and then we had to take a train to Warsaw to figure out our own accommodation by ourselves. So they didn't even have any of that at the moment for refugees. we stayed in a hotel that we got for ourselves. Then afterward, we found out that some people were trying to help the refugee, the Black students, because some people posted about it on Twitter, how they suffered in that situation. So some people started sending money and some other people were carrying out the work. So somebody actually had hotels booked for maybe months or something. And it's, okay, so you need help. Okay, go here. So that was how I was able to stay for the 2 weeks in Poland. And God helped me very much because I wouldn't have known about that information. It wasn't very much publicized that those people were helping out Black students. So it was just of God, really.
Wow,
Yes.
that's the thing that people don't always know about war situations. I mean, I would never know, that really, I guess, war correspondents and other people that have been in war zones will know that the flow of information is so limited and challenging to actually navigate at such, those difficult times, finding out where to go, how to get there. I remember speaking to you at the time and, just basic necessities like a phone, battery, where to charge your phone, having some data and being able to contact your family and friends and let them know that you were okay, making sure you've got enough charge and about a power bank to actually keep you going, just little basic things like that you wouldn't think about because you don't sort of prepare for it, because you don't expect bombs to start going off at random in the place that you're studying. So thank goodness that you were able to get that information, the vital information that you needed in order to get that safety for that 2 weeks. And what did you do during those 2 weeks period? Obviously you're in this hostile environment with people not really wanting you in their country, but you've had this sort of opportunity to stay in a hotel or in lodgings. It was a hotel, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a hotel.
So what did you do for your 2 weeks in Warsaw?
So the first couple of days we were waiting to hear good news that we could go back. We didn't get any. So instead we were helping other people who were stuck there trying to figure out how to leave because they didn't want to go. Some people were quite stubborn and stayed for at least a week or two more, and they really
where were they
suffered.
staying? Sorry, where were they stuck?
A lot of people were in Sumi, which got worse and worse because a lot of them went to train stations and hid in the bunkers, and they were stuck there because some of them collapsed and they couldn't get out for weeks. So it was a horrible situation for some of them. Yes, I was really thankful that I even got out the first day, even if it was so hard, because some other people suffered even more. People in Sumi were completely hopeless for weeks, maybe even months. The people in Kiev, too many of them were trying to come to Lviv. So by the third day of the war, Lviv was completely overpopulated with everyone else from Ukraine. And after that, Poland realized that they couldn't just choose and pick who to get into their country. So they made it easier for everyone to leave to all the other countries as well, to Hungary and to Romania. They allowed everyone to get on the trains and just get on the train as soon as you can and go. And they'll figure you out on the train. So that now became another big problem because some of my other friends that were left there in Lviv who didn't leave on the first day suffered so much. After they asked us who got out first, how we got there, they tried to do what we did, and when they got to the border, they were turned away. Some of them even had guns pointed at them for no reason to let them through. So they went back. Some of them walked the 5-hour trip 3 times, going and coming, and they didn't let them through. Then they had to finally get on the train. But when they get to the train station, it's full. They have to push through many crowds to get in. Some people it was a stampede. It was horrible. Somebody even died. An Indian girl died in that situation. But they were just trying to leave. And even while they were trying to get on the trains, it was another battle because apparently they were throwing the Africans off the trains for some reason, just to get their dog on, like one of the Ukrainians, to get their pet on the train, they would throw out an African person. And they did that a couple of times. They were also hostile on the train when everyone was just trying to survive. So it didn't actually make sense. But anyway, thankfully, a lot of them were able to get out using the trains. And when they got out, they were at peace. After getting to Poland, I after helping a lot of people, I was trying to figure out what to do in my own life, and like if I should go home to Nigeria or if I should figure out how to stay in Poland. I tried to find out about that, but they didn't provide that opportunity. So then my Auntie Tony just said that I might as well just renew my UK visa because it had just expired in January, the month before. And then I wasn't sure they were going to give me the visa because they were mostly trying to help Ukrainian families get to the UK without problems and So when I got to the visa place, even this is another testimony actually. So the hotel I went to that the charity people from the US were organizing was actually the hotel where the UK visa appointment place was, and that
Wow.
was just surprising for me because I just had to come downstairs to my appointment and everything went well. And I got my visa on the day before my 15 days in Poland expired, so I was able to leave in peace.
Wow.
But some other people just left Poland and went to other EU countries, and they welcomed them there. At least in the first few months, they gave them maybe a year stay or more. A lot of them were able to get jobs. So a lot of people had good experiences, while some other people, like my friends and a number of people, just got on the flights that Nigeria organized for them, or the other countries like Zambians and other places. Their presidents just sent a plane to pick them up and take them back home. So a lot of them did that instead. But then I just ended up going to the UK and I stayed there for 5 months.
Wow. So how did you get to the UK? Did you take the train or fly or
No, I flew.
yeah. And when you got to the UK, I just want to talk about courage a little bit. So Address the Daughters is all about, encouraging women to be all that they're called to be, live in purpose, know their identity and just be courageous, really. We have a courage conference every year, and this is something that I was thinking of when we had our courage conference this year, 2024, in March. We were talking about courageous women, and you were someone that came to mind because your story is one that I've admired for, and thought that, even though, you were so young, you were so courageous in going through all this. I mean, you didn't have very much choice in the matter, being there for education and by choice. And obviously the war was obviously something that was out of your control, but just facing it with such courage. And obviously you were so fortunate to have left the day you did, to have had some direction and advice, to have been in contact with your family, to have had the resources and been able to face the trial of making that journey for 5 hours, facing those difficulties and being able to get over to the UK in the first batch within a short space of time after the war broke out. So your story is probably one of the more fortunate, even though it was, obviously extremely challenging, but you still had to, face those challenges with courage. So I'm just curious to know how did you manage to sort of stay the course of time? You mentioned that you stayed in the UK for 5 months. You had the 2 weeks in Warsaw. Prior to that, obviously, you were in Ukraine and Lviv. Just tell us a little bit about your mindset. What did this all do to your mind in terms of how you saw the world and how, did it make you more resilient?
Yes, actually it did. I had to become more independent, I think, because I used to be more reliant on other people's direction and advice and stuff like that. But then I had to think on my feet a lot of the time there. So if I didn't do certain things that I did, I would have missed that opportunity here and there. So there's that. And also, I had to start figuring out. Another thing was figuring out how to get to a new school because they made that incredibly difficult as well. So a lot of the burden was mine. Actually, all of the burden was mine to find a new school. So I checked. It was really difficult. I emailed all the schools I could find in Europe. I literally went country by country. I searched all the medical schools. I made a list and I emailed all of them. I followed up. I did everything I could. And finally, thankfully, I got a school. But yeah, so God helped me a lot because it was really depressing. It was so depressing.
Mm,
At that time, it felt hopeless. So many people actually quit medicine. They were in their fifth
mm,
year because it was so difficult. Especially people in Sumi and Hakiv that were already under fire. Even their schools were bombed.
mm,
So there was no hope of getting their transcripts or anything. Anyway, they couldn't
mm,
even continue their classes remotely because there was no one to continue classes with. So a lot of them were just left hanging like that. And
mm,
for me, my school did their best to hold on to us. They didn't want to give us our transcripts for a really long time. And we asked them, what are we supposed to do? They said, oh, we should come back to the country. And then it was really difficult. Anyway, so the only solution that was forthcoming was for us to transfer to another Ukrainian school that was starting like a remote location outside Ukraine because having tried to get our transcripts on our own to no avail, we just figured that maybe another school can reason with them since they all work the same way. So I had emailed all the schools in Europe. Everyone was telling me the same thing, which made sense. I need to have my transcripts. I need to have my transcripts. And I was even offered admission to like three different universities. But I ended up with this other Ukrainian one, and thankfully I was able to finish eventually. And I heard about it by chance as well. It wasn't very yes, it wasn't very well known because by the time they had taken people for that year, they had admitted many transfer students. They closed the admissions and a lot of people were left hanging again by the time they heard about it. So I was also favored in that regard. And finally, I finished, and I'm just happy that it's over because I know so many people who quit just for that, just during that situation, and they couldn't figure out how to get out of it. They couldn't figure out how to continue and how to do everything. So
mm.
yes.
Wow. Wow. So you really had to be resilient. You really had to sort of push through and just keep going, against all odds, against the challenges. And you've made it out. So how many years in total was your training, your education end to end?
Well, in Ukraine, in total, it was about 7 or 6.5 anyway.
Wow. Wow. And then you finished off elsewhere. Was that in Poland?
Yes, it was in Poland. So the new school was a Ukrainian school that started their branch in Poland. And yeah, it was just an answer to prayer, to be honest, because they admitted us based off their credit book assessment. So Ukraine has like a a credit book, which is what they calculate your points for your transcript from anyway. So this credit book is national and they use the same point system for it. So in all the schools, all the students have access to this credit book. So you already have scans of it anyway, whether they want to give you or not, you have it. That's what we used and we submitted to the school. So they were able to access us based off of that and put us in the right year, put us in the right semester. Then we're able to continue. Then we're able to get our transcripts somewhere along the way while we were in the schools. That was another battle. And a number of us were delayed because of that to finish. And that's why mine ended up being 6.5 instead of 6. So but I'm just happy that I like everything still worked out despite the prolongation of the time.
Mm. Yeah.
So I'm just
Wow.
thankful it was over.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ayo. This has been so inspiring, so interesting, and so enlightening just about your experience of education, of war, of international being an international student. And 6 years is 6.5 years, very long time to be pursuing something. And what I'd love to say is congratulations. Remember getting the news of you finishing, and just what an achievement, what an achievement to be able to persevere and go through COVID, war, hostility, financial, international, all manner of difficulties, and just make it out on top. So well done, well done, well done. I'm just going to highlight the definition of courage, as Oxford Dictionary would tell us, is the ability to do something that frightens one, bravery, or the strength in the face of pain or grief. And I think that is something that you've highlighted, illustrated for us in your journey, your story of courage today, in terms of you've had to face frightening situations and be courageous. You've had to face things that are painful and, you know, still come out on top. So well done, well done. Finally, let's end on a happy note. What are your sort of top 3 tips of someone who faces challenges? How do you say they should go about being courageous? What do you think makes you, what made you courageous in these situations that you faced, and what would be your advice to others? Top 3.
I think they should definitely become closer to God because that really is the entire plot of it. And then they should also have the right support system, like their family and maybe supportive friends as well. And then for themselves, they should remember why they started the thing they're doing in the first place. I think that should remind them of what they wanted to do, so they'll be more determined to finish it.
Yeah.
Instead of getting lost in the process and why it's so hard. And yes.
Wow. I love those 3 tips. Know God, have a support system, and remember your why. Absolutely love it. Thank you so much, Ayo. It's been wonderful speaking with you, hearing your story of courage. You are a courageous woman, and we look forward to hearing more about your successes and achievements as a doctor. So thank you so much for sharing your story with Dress the Daughters, and God bless. All the best. Bye-bye.
And thank you.